Thank you for coming, everybody. So my name is Carole Boothroyd from our local Highlands Regional League of Women Voters chapter. So this is our topic. We're going to talk about semi-open primaries and some other issues around voting that are of interest. So we'll get going. So here's what we're going to cover. The political parties that are in Maine currently, and what it means to be in a party or unenrolled. And then a little bit of background on semi-open primaries and how they're going to be used in Maine. And then the March 5th, 2024 election, which as we all know is the presidential primary. And then ranked choice voting, a little bit of a review and how it's going to be used in the upcoming year. And finally a summary. So here we go. So everybody knows what a political party is, right? It's a group of people who agree on how the government should run. And you can join when you register to vote. Check a box. So these are the 5 qualified parties currently, political parties in Maine. Democratic, the Green Independent, Libertarian. They just recently qualified. No labels, and Republican. To become a qualified political party in Maine, you have to submit to the Secretary of State 5,000 or more valid voter members, signatures. So these are the 5 that have done that. And anybody can enroll in one of these parties when they register to vote. There are some smaller parties in Maine, believe it or not. We never hear of them, really. They're not listed on the voter registration card. You won't see them in a primary, on a primary ballot. But you could see them on the general ballot, general election ballot. So, as I mentioned, the qualified political parties have to show that they have enough support throughout the state by submitting 5,000 or more signatures. And if you're in a qualified political party and your party wants to have a primary, then you can be listed as a candidate in it. So we already know that. 5 qualified parties. The smaller parties that haven't got enough members to become a qualified party are called qualifying. So qualified, qualifying. And they can get the candidates onto the general election ballot. You know, they can enroll voters and help their candidates. Hello.
Hi.
Need help? No. What's that? Okay.
Thank you.
So have you heard of them? The Alliance Party? It's a centrist party that sort of emanated out of the southern states. The Yankee Party is a New England party dedicated to regional autonomy. So if that's of interest to you, you can. I kind of like the name, the Yankee Party. And then the Socialist Party, which has been around a long time. Really dates back to Eugene Debs and the workers' movement. They're very much supportive of the working class, working people. So you don't have to join a political party as a voter. If you choose not to, you are what is considered unenrolled. And in Maine, about 33% of all the registered voters are unenrolled. In the past, if you were not in a party, you were an unenrolled voter, you could not vote in the presidential primaries. You had to be enrolled in one of the parties that were holding a primary in order to vote in the presidential primary. Just a note, nobody has to be in any party to vote in a general election. In a general election, everybody gets the same ballot. So whether you're enrolled, unenrolled, party, whatever, you can still vote in the general election. We were just talking about this, a little tricky. A lot of times people who are unenrolled, that is, they're not a member of any political party, refer to themselves as independent, which can get confusing because there is an independent party. It's the Green Independent Party. So they're really not independent. They're unenrolled, not a member of a party. And because presidential primaries are typically Democratic and Republican, if you are a Green Independent Party member or a Libertarian or a No Labels member, you cannot vote in this primary that's coming up in March. So in other words, if you are enrolled in any party other than the Democratic and Republican who are holding primaries, you can't vote in it. But if you're unenrolled, you can. You can choose which of the primary ballots you want to have. If you're in a party and you want to change your party, you can do so, but it has to be 15 days before the election date. And if you want to switch back after the election, you have to wait 3 months before you can unenroll. So alas, if you are in a party and you wanted to change before the March 5th presidential primary, the date has passed. It was February 19th for this primary election.
Carole, that's February. This is January. We're still in January.
Oops. Yeah.
Trying to get winter over in a hurry here.
Sorry, that should be January. Yeah. January 19th. 15 days before the March 5th. Yeah.
Wait, that'd still be February.
Right? Still February.
Yeah, February. You're right.
It's not that.
I'm getting confused here.
So we have until February 19th to do it then, if we want to, is what you're
That's
saying.
right. It hasn't passed. What am I
Okay,
thinking?
all right.
I'm thinking of January. So you still have time. So if you're in a party, like, let's say you're a Libertarian, just jumping in on that one, and you want to vote in this presidential primary, you could change your registration to Democrat or Republican, or you can unenroll. Either way, you'll be able to vote in that primary. If you do want to enroll and you want to vote in the presidential primary, you'll have to choose which primary ballot you want. If you're not sure what party you might be registered in or what your current registration is, just get a hold of your town clerk, Lisa Rocco, and she can tell you. Any questions about unenrolled party member? Anything about that? Yeah.
If you are registered, that's the party you vote in though, correct? But you don't get to choose if you are enrolled. That's only if you're unenrolled?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you are a Republican, you have to vote in the Republican primary.
Yeah.
If you're a Democrat, you have to vote in the Democratic primary. But if you're unenrolled, you can choose which one. So a little bit about how we got here. As we just talked about, open primaries allow a voter to choose whichever primary they want to vote in without having to change their party enrollment. The open part just means that the voter can choose their primary election, and their political party doesn't matter. So we don't have an open primary. We have a semi-open primary. And what that means is only unenrolled voters can choose which primary ballot they wish to vote in. But now they can participate, which had the full support of the league, and personally my own support, because I really believe that election should be about voters. So this is a step in the right direction. If we used to have a closed primary, where you had to be enrolled in a party in order to vote in the primary election. So we have made it a semi-open now. So with a closed primary, like we used to have, a lot of people were excluded. They couldn't vote in it. This is slightly more inclusive. League of Women Voters always supports policies that widen the reach, the number of people who will come and vote. Maine does pretty well. We have a voting percentage. I don't know the exact number, but it's around 80, maybe 85%, which puts us like #1 in the country. But I think we should strive for 100%. So how do we get here? It was a bill, LD 231. John looked it up today and got some background info on that. You want to share it?
Just that it seems like it passed with pretty wide support through the House and the Senate. There was some debate on whether or not it would be funded afterwards. I guess state bills have to be funded before they can actually be passed into law.
Yeah.
And then the governor allowed it to pass and become a law. So.
Right, in 2022 it became law. And therefore we will have semi-open primaries in the March 5th presidential primary election for 2024. This is the first time in the state of Maine that unenrolled voters can cast a ballot in the presidential primary. So, yay! We already mentioned, if you're enrolled in a party and the party's having a primary, you can only vote in your own party's primary. You can't switch. That's where the semi part comes in. Right, so we already went over this, how you have to change parties if you wish, or change from a party to an unenrolled status 15 days before the election. If you join a party, you have to stay in it for 3 months before you can switch. Any questions about semi-open primaries? Eric?
Of course, we're talking about the presidential primary, but we'll have another primary election for local and U.S. legislative officer stuff come June.
Mm-hmm.
So this will carry for the June primaries as well, right? Am I getting ahead?
That is correct. I think I have it in here somewhere, but that's correct. In Maine, all primaries will be semi-open primaries. So as Eric just mentioned, it's on June 11th, the state primary election. That would be for Maine House, Maine Senate,
U.S. House and Senate.
U.S. House and Senate.
No Senate, but there's no Senate candidates this year, but.
Yeah. No? I think Angus might be up.
Yeah, somebody's trying to take his spot.
Is it?
Demi
Kazunas. What her name is? But yeah.
Kazunas.
Demi Kazunas. Yeah.
She used to be the chair of the Republican State Committee. And then November 5th, presidential and state general election. But we're focusing today on that March 5th election, the primary, where Mainers will vote either in a Democratic or a Republican primary because they are the only two parties that are holding primaries. I wish we had some students here because I would say any time is a good time to register to vote in Maine. You can register right up to voting day in Maine, which is incredible. Not all states allow that. There's no cutoff date for registering to vote in person. at your town hall, your city hall. You can walk in to the polling place. There'll be a registration desk there, and you can register to vote and vote. You can vote if you're a citizen of the United States, if you are an established resident in the town where you intend to register and vote, and you're at least 18 years of age. If you have all those requirements in place, you cannot be denied the vote. There always seems to be some, I don't know, contention around that first one there, that registered voters, once you are registered and prove that you're a resident and you are who you say you are, you're not required to show an ID to vote again in the polling place. And even if you don't have ID or proof of where you live, if you go and you look at the voting laws in Maine, you could be homeless and still you're eligible to vote, as long as you can sign an affidavit saying, I live in a tent here on the corner of whatever, you must be allowed to vote, what they call a challenged ballot. A couple of years ago, they passed a law where you can pre-register to vote when you're 16. So if you're going into the Bureau of Motor Vehicles when you're going for your license, you can register to vote at the same time, but you can't vote until you're 18. Except if you're a registered voter and you're 17, you can vote in the primary as long as you will be 18 by the general election. Okay, I think we went over this. If you're an unenrolled voter or you know someone who is and they want to vote absentee, they can do that. They just have to indicate on the absentee ballot request which primary ballot they want. And they'll still be unenrolled when it's all over. And you can find out what party you're in if you don't know from your clerk. Our clerk is Lisa Ronco. Remember absentee balloting? It really got going during COVID, and now it's become sort of the choice for a lot of people who like the convenience of it. You can request your absentee ballot online through the Secretary of State's office. You can call up your town clerk and say, I want an absentee ballot. You can send in a request by mail. A lot of ways that you can ask for an absentee ballot. And there's a deadline, February 29th, for the March 5th election, to request a no excuse ballot. After that, in the last week, if you need an absentee ballot, you would have to have some sort of excuse, like I broke my leg, I can't go out, something that would keep you from voting. This is a good step. I like this. You can request an absentee paper ballot to vote, to be sent to you in the mail. If you have a disability around print, such as a vision impairment or blindness or some physical dexterity limitations or other cognitive or learning disabilities, you can request an electronic accessible ballot that will be sent to your email. So that's another good step. And they're available to voters at least 30 days before Election Day, just like any absentee ballot. You probably don't need to go through all this, or do we? I was hoping we'd have some students here, and I've never done it before. But does everybody here know how to get an absentee ballot? Anybody? Don't need this? So we'll skip,
The only thing is that a lot of people forget to sign the envelope. And
absolutely.
that is something they really need to do.
Don't forget to sign the envelope.
Yeah.
Although they did pass a law a couple of years ago that the clerks, you know, if you don't sign the back of the envelope, it will be considered, what's the term?
Challenged.
Challenged, won't be counted yet. But this law that they passed requires the town clerks to try to cure the ballot. That is, they will call or email or get a hold of the person and say, hey, you forgot to sign your envelope, do you want to come in and do it? So they attempt to get the person to cure it. But they don't want votes to not count because somebody forgot.
So that's the outside signature?
Yes,
Outside.
once you close up the envelope, there's a line for the signature, and the clerk will be looking for that.
I just haven't done it in a while.
Yeah.
I forgot. Okay.
So you can order it. When it arrives, it'll have instructions. You can take your time and vote the way you want, put it, seal it in the envelope, and sign it. And check in the absentee ballots. The clerk will look at your signature and compare it to your voter card to see that they look the same. Well, certainly our town clerks are not like handwriting experts, but, you know, they do check it. In Dover, we have a drop box. It's on the wall right outside the main door of the municipal building. So if you want to drop your absentee ballot in the drop box, it's there 24/7. If you mail it, make sure you mail it in time. I don't know about you, but I've noticed the mail has slowed down a bit, so make sure you mail it in plenty of time. Usually one stamp will do it, but like in some elections, there's a lot of referendum questions and different things might add some bulk to it. And you can track your ballot to make sure it was received by your town, qualified. You know, the clerk will check it in as good, and you can do that through the Secretary of State's website. So that's a nice feature too. You can track to make sure everything went smoothly with your absentee ballot. They have to be back by 8 p.m. on election day, so just keep in mind that, you know, that's the deadline.
Does that mean that in the box too, if you have a drop box?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The clerks will go out at 8 o'clock and take any that are still in there.
Oh, that's it.
You know, they do periodically bring them in.
I guess they're locked after that?
Yeah.
Okay,
This is
I've
a-
never used one of those either. Thank you.
Yeah. You can even walk in and give it to them. But it has to be there by 8. That's when the polls close. All right, ranked choice voting. We've been using it for a couple of years now. Every year it seems to extend how we're going to use it. It's a typical ballot. This one is from the June 2018 election. I want to call your attention to this bottom write-in line, because we'll come back to that. But just note that there is one there. So, why does Maine use ranked choice voting? Because it was voted on referendum questions. It went to the courts and got some legal decisions. And the provisions of the Maine Constitution allows Maine to use ranked choice voting for all primary elections. And for general elections, but only for federal offices. So that would be the office of the president, the congresspeople, House representatives and senators. And it will only be used if there's there's 2 or more if there's more than 2 candidates on the ballot. Because ranked choice voting allows the winner to have a majority that is above 50%. So if you only have two candidates in the first round, one of them is going to get more than 50%. So how come we don't use it for the Maine governor and Maine legislative races? Because in 2017, the Maine Supreme Court Judicial Court advised that the use of ranked choice voting for elections within the state, excuse me, didn't comply with the wording of the Maine Constitution, which says that the winner of a state election can win by a plurality rather than a majority. Plurality meaning whoever got the most votes. And, you know, it happened quite frequently, at least recently, that someone could win the governorship with 35% of the vote because there were 3 candidates or 4 candidates. So, ranked choice voting says you have to have a majority, but our state constitution does not. It calls for a plurality. In contrast, in Maine anyway, primary elections and elections for federal office are governed by statute, law, state law, and not by the Maine Constitution. So that's why we can use it for the federal elections and for federal and for primaries, which are basically party activities, but not for our state positions.
Carole, do they, because of how Maine splits up the electoral votes?
Yeah.
Does that ranked choice voting for president only count for the one vote for the state overall for all 3, or do they split?
They split them, CD 1 and 2.
So for all of CD1, they do ranked choice voting, and then they do it for CD2,
Yeah.
and then they do it for the state as a whole.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we split our electoral vote.
Yep.
Yeah. Maine, leading the way. That's our saying, isn't it, dear ago? We lead. Maine was the first state to use ranked choice voting in federal elections, starting back in 2018 for the congressional and general election. Later in that year, ranked choice voting was approved by the legislature for both state and federal primaries. And then in 2020, it was expanded to include the first ever ranked choice presidential primary and presidential general election. So think about it. When you go to vote in November for president of the United States, you can use ranked choice voting, which I think is great. Because let's say you want to vote your conscience, you want to vote for a candidate that you really, really like, you don't think they can win, you want to vote for them. So you can do that, and then you can rank your second choice and, you know, think strategically. So this is just a summary of what we were just talking about. We use ranked choice voting for all primary and general elections for the presidency, the Senate, and the U.S. Senate and U.S. House. And for all primary elections. That would be primary elections for the governor, the Maine legislature. And in Portland and Westbrook, they actually voted to use ranked choice voting in their general elections for their local offices. That is something that a town could decide to do if they wished. What do you think? Should we try to get our town to use ranked choice voting for select board and so forth? Something to think about.
Sure, why not?
Why not? So, we're going to use ranked choice voting in the presidential primary. You know, this is how it works. You rank the candidate in your first choice, and then if you wish, you can rank another candidate as your second choice. If your first choice, or many people's first choice, just doesn't comes in last, let's say, as far as number of votes, then your second choice votes would then be allocated to the candidate that you chose for your second choice. And that will continue. Each choice, each column will continue to be accumulated until one of the candidates gets above 50%. So they have to get a majority to win a ranked choice election. I just said that, didn't I? Yes. So you can decide whether you want to rank or not. You don't have to, but you can. Why do it? Because, like I said, you might want to really vote for a candidate that you really like, although you're not so sure they could ever win. You can rank them first and then go for a more strategic choice in your second. You can't hurt your favorite candidate by ranking other candidates. Their votes will all count until they're eliminated because they're not in the running anymore. If there's an election with 2 people, someone's going to get 50% or more. It's just the way it works. So this only is used when there's more than 2 candidates. I wonder how many presidential candidates we're going to have on that November election. Could have quite a few. Definitely a libertarian, probably a no labels. Green, yes, they're going to run a presidential. So we might have 5 or more candidates on that November election.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got here late, so I missed this.
Yeah.
No labels is a recognized party?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that.
We have
Thank you.
5 in Maine.
Yeah, sorry. I was late.
Democratic, Republican, Libertarian, Green Independent, and no labels.
Thank you.
And to get to be a qualified party, they have to show enough support throughout the state by submitting at least 5,000 member signatures to the Secretary of State.
Thank
And
you.
then they're considered a qualified party. Yeah.
Carole, could you go back one screen? The
Sure.
very last sentence down there is an important one for people to know.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that. I pointed out that there's one line on the ballot for a write-in candidate. For the ranked choice voting, the ranked choice voting law states that a voter can include no more than 1 write-in candidate. So you only have that one line. And this is important. The Secretary of State's office will list all the qualified write-in candidates. If you want to be a candidate in Maine, you have to submit what's called a declaration to the Secretary of State's office. And then you can be a qualified write-in candidate. If a voter writes in someone who's not a qualified candidate, it doesn't count. And I've seen this in helping at the polls. You know, people will write in their neighbor or somebody who maybe they think it's a sort of a protest vote. But what they don't realize is it just goes away. It doesn't count at all. So if you're going to write in, at least pick a qualified write-in candidate if you want that vote to count.
Is that for every office, or is that just for president?
That's for every office.
Even like local?
Yep. Oh,
Yeah. Sector, yeah.
well, not local, not like select board. That doesn't really go through the state, does it?
It doesn't, there is a write-in line,
There is.
I believe so,
So it must then.
yeah.
It must have to be a qualified.
So is that just
write-in.
for like federal and state races, I guess?
Well, she's saying
We'll
they,
have to find out.
yeah, I'm not sure about
I think
that.
the town of Camden just did
literally, I think everybody that actually was on their ballot was a write-in,
Yeah.
because nobody
Nobody ran.
declared to be running until like 3 weeks before, and then they all went online, and, cause they were all running for, they have districts in Hamden
Yeah,
for their select board, and they all went online and like asked to be voted on, so there
So
must
they-
be some way for that to work,
so they weren't declared.
yeah.
So I don't think it probably does apply to local elections, because they don't really run through the state so much. So it must be, yeah, state and federal that require a qualified candidate. But I'll have to look, make sure about that
It'd be
one.
a town by town rule also.
Yeah, they could, yeah. I've never heard of anybody like getting hold of our clerk and saying, I declare myself a write-in candidate, have
No,
you?
I haven't heard that either.
No, so I don't,
Yeah.
I mean, because we've also written in for things, I mean, I've seen Mickey Mouse got voted over,
Yeah.
Shannon Rhoda got voted for something a couple times.
somebody voted for me once.
Yeah.
Did you do it?
I got voted in as an undeclared write-in candidate
No
in
kidding.
Pennsylvania for auditor for a 6-year term. I got 2 votes.
Two votes. Is that you and Keisha?
That was me and my mom.
Yeah. So I guess what I just said about how it won't count doesn't really apply to local elections, but the chances are that you'll get 1 or 2 votes and then it won't count anyway, so.
Unless only 2 people vote for it.
That's true. Can you imagine getting an auditor position for 6 years because 2 people
Well,
voted
that's
for
what-
you?
Well, see, in Pennsylvania, in every single little town, and they have townships too, which are like Atkinson or something, like these
Yeah.
tiny little undeclared things.
Yeah.
They all have like a supervisor, and they have a board, and they have 3 auditors, and they have all these positions for like 200 people.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to get, because the whole ballot is blank.
So that could happen,
Yeah. So if anyone writes anyone in, they just call them and say, "Do you really want this?"
right?
In some of those
What?
positions, yeah.
That's great. Okay, so you go to row, you only can mark 1 oval in each row, and only 1 oval per column. If you, for some reason, put 2 ovals in a column, you have disqualified your ballot, so I want to be careful about that. You can rank as many candidates as you like. You don't need to rank if you don't want to. And of course, if you make a mistake, just ask the clerk. We'll give you a new ballot. And don't be concerned about that because your vote is important. So if you make a mistake, go to the clerk, say, I need a new ballot. She or he will give you one. So you have to have only 1 per row, per column, and only 1 in each column. If you were to put these 2, there's no way to tell who you wanted, so that would be tossed. Anything about ranked choice voting? Yeah.
I've heard the two things that it doesn't matter if you just choose 1 candidate, and what if you or put that person all the way across? It's the
it
same
won't-
thing.
It won't disqualify that ballot. It won't count extra, you only get 1 vote.
So it
It doesn't matter. If you vote once for your first choice and that's it, that's the vote that counts. If you put more than 1 for that candidate, they only get the 1. So, it won't.
Yeah,
I know. I've heard stuff too, yeah, I know.
Carole, how do they actually calculate if they have to go back to ranked choice voting? How does that work on a physical level? Do they have to go back to each ballot then and find the people that voted for candidate C and then go back to their second choices in every town?
Yes, in a primary. But, yes. Oh, you mean like for legislative offices? Remember, these are only used for federal and primaries. The results will be sent to Augusta, where they have a machine that tabulates ranked choice voting. So we don't do it as a town.
Oh, so everything just gets sent to the state and they tabulate it all?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Right, they can tabulate the first choices, but everything beyond that is done at the Secretary of State's office.
Right.
Different rounds, however many it may take to get the majority.
Right.
It just seems like it would get very complicated trying to tabulate, but
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it by hand. But you're bringing up a thing. Part of the reason that people have gotten upset about the length of time it takes to report the results. One, absentee balloting and the fact that a lot of states don't allow any processing of the absentee ballots until the polls close. So that delays a lot of that. And then ranked choice voting. It takes a little longer to get the results. So. All right, finally, we're at the summary. So, at a glance, the Secretary of State in January completed what was needed to have semi-open primaries, and people could start requesting their absentee ballots. February, they begin mailing out the absentee ballots. They give you 30 days ahead of the election to when you can get that absentee ballot. We already mentioned February 19th, the last day to change your party ahead of the March 5th primary election. And the 29th is the last day to request a no excuse absentee ballot. After that, you would have to have some kind of excuse to be voting absentee. That primary election day, presidential primary, is March 5th. And the absentee ballots have to be received by 8 p.m. on that date to count. And if you're voting absentee, don't forget to sign the back of the envelope. Otherwise, someone will try to call you. So, if you are a Democrat, and you're a member of the Democratic Party, you can vote in the Democratic primary. If you want to vote in the Republican primary, you would have to switch to the Republican Party, and that would have to be done by February 19th. Or you could change your status to unenrolled, in which case you could choose a Republican primary ballot. If you're a Green Independent, if you want to participate in the presidential primary, you would have to switch your party registration either to another party or to unenrolled. Same for Libertarian, same for no labels. If you're a Republican, you'll vote in the Republican primary unless you switch your party affiliation by the 19th of February. You can switch. If you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you would have to register as a Democrat or an unenrolled. And if you're unenrolled, you can choose which one you want to participate in.
That day, on election day.
Yes.
Okay.
Or if you're voting absentee, when you order your absentee ballot, there would be a box to say which. There's only 2 party primaries, Democratic and Republican, so you could choose which absentee ballot you wanted. Yeah. So the presidential primary is March 5th. We're going to have semi-open primaries, meaning unenrolled voters can vote in the primary of their choice. We'll be using ranked choice voting in that presidential primary. You can request your absentee ballots anytime now. And we already said last day to request a no excuse absentee ballot is February 29th. So people might be confused because in the reporting from the New Hampshire primary, you know, people were saying, oh, the Democrats are voting in the Republican primary. I didn't check that out, but if they did, that would mean they have completely open primaries. We don't. They have a semi-open primary, meaning just unenrolled voters can choose which one they want to vote in. So if you're any other party member, if you're enrolled in any other party, you, like the Green Independent, Libertarian, or no labels, you can't vote at all in this primary unless you switch or become unenrolled. And of course, new voters can become registered anytime, even on election day. Any questions? Threw a lot of information at you, didn't I?
Yes, sorry again. Another friend told me that February 5th early voting starts.
In Maine,
Once again, I'm not sure
yeah.
if that's correct. So I thought,
I mean-
yes, that too. Yeah, early voting,
Well, I mean, technically, we don't have early voting.
We do.
You can go in and vote.
You can get your absentee ballot,
Yeah.
fill it out, and
Oh,
leave it right
okay.
there.
Or you can go in the office and vote right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With an absentee
Yeah,
ballot,
you can
pretty
do that,
much.
that's what I was saying.
It's pretty much an absentee ballot that you can
Oh, that's it.
do, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no problem. But it is early,
Good
so yeah.
questions.
Yeah, just
So
trying to
Phyllis,
get
will I get a
things straight, but
sticker
who told me
if
what?
I do that or no?
Well,
No, I don't think so. I
We'd
haven't
have
seen
Then I
to
think
really,
that, yeah,
really
we're
insist
sick
on
one
one,
time.
but
Okay.
they probably could find you one.
we should look into that. Yeah.
When did we stop doing caucuses in like over
We
the
haven't.
primary? We haven't stopped doing them. We're
No.
still doing those too.
We haven't stopped doing caucuses because state law requires to remain a qualified political party. You must caucus.
Okay.
But we have a primary, so
Okay.
the caucuses now are more sort of party business, organizing, you know, voting in members to the county committee and stuff like that. Whereas it used to be you would caucus for your presidential, you know, the one you wanted. But since we have a primary, that doesn't occur anymore. But we're required by law. Parties are required by law to have a caucus every 2 years.
Every 2 years, yeah.
That might change, I don't know.
So if we were completely open, what would that mean?
It would mean that anybody could go in and choose any primary ballot that they
Okay.
wished, without any reference to what
Okay.
party they're registered in. That would be a completely open primary. And there's lots of variations on that open primary thing, because I think California has an open primary, but then they have the top 4 that go on to the general. There's a lot of variations on
Or
it.
they have like a jungle, they call it like a jungle primary. 'Cause it's just like
Really?
the top 4 candidates from whatever party go in.
Yeah.
So if it's like 3 Democrats and 1 Republican or vice versa, that's
You'll
just
go-
who's in general.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the
Could
top
be.
2 winners could be from the same party,
Mhm.
and you're voting.
Yeah. We used to in
Open.
In Pennsylvania for like county commissioner, it would be the primaries would decide 2 candidates each. So there would be 4 candidates, and then there would be 3 commissioners. So it would just be like one party would get 1 and the other one would get 2, which was weird too. But
Yeah. Well, we know that states can determine how they conduct their elections, so they're all different. I would hate to move to one that had a really complicated system and try to learn. Ours is, I think Maine has a pretty straightforward system of voting. All right, I have a couple of these on the table if anybody wants them. The Make Your Vote Count Guide. I can see it online as well. And some links from the League about voting. You can check out their website, which is LWVME.org. It's got all kinds of information about voting. If you want to get involved with the league, I have some pamphlets over there. We have a local chapter. It's called the Highlands Regional Chapter. We just started it right before COVID, and then it kind of didn't do much through COVID, and now we're up to about 9 or 10 members, stretching from Dover to Corinth, Plymouth. There's someone who lives out in Bradford, so it's the Highlands region. That's that. Okay, John. I don't know how to turn this off.